Welcome back to Brick City. It's your boy, the real Charlemagne. Hey, as always, don't forget to subscribe to YouTube. Check me out on iPod, iTunes, uh, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Yeah, that's Apple Podcasts, not iTunes. I'm sorry. Spotify, also iHeartRadio, and also you can check me out on Facebook. If you go to my fan page, Brick City Show, you can pull up all the podcasts there. Check me out, and go check out my past shows. But today, you see I'm rocking this Carolina blue. And also, we got a Carolina grad. So, that kind of goes hand in hand for what's about to happen this weekend. If you catch the replay, hopefully we on the top side. No, we going to be on the top side. If I don't, I'll throw out a gift to y'all. But, you know how I do. But anyway, today we got my high school friend, Miss Nneka Jones to Tapia. Tapia. Look, you know what? I don't want to say it, but I said I'm gonna say it. I want to say tilapia.
Everybody does that.
And I'm sure you get that a lot because I was like, I want to throw that L in. You know what I'm saying?
Everybody does it.
Look, I'm glad because like we was just talking before we got started. You was like, hey, I'm sure people tear up my name too. Charlemagne. You like,
you're not gonna tell the folks how I know you as Keith, but
right. Go and tell them. Look, that's what some people. I know when I be doing some podcasts with some people, they be like, "Who is Keith?" On the backside, and then my friends, like I said, I have Tremaine, and I had some other classmates, and then they're like, "Hey, they get excited, and then it's just like Keith." And I be like, you know what I'm saying? But it's all good. It's all good. It's all the same. This is the stage. And but without further ado, tell us a little bit about yourself,
Nneka. Well, what do you want to know? I'm an open book. I'm Nneka Jones Tapia. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm currently the managing director of justice initiatives at an organization in Chicago called Chicago Beyond. I live in Chicago now. Though I'm born and raised in Grifton, North Carolina, small town. If you blink, you miss it. And I've been with Chicago Beyond now for about 4 years and running their justice initiatives. And we can get more into what I'm doing there. But prior to joining the organization, I was the warden at Cook County Jail here in Chicago, one of the largest single site jails in the country. I was the first psychologist, first clinical psychologist to ever run a large correctional facility in the country. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but definitely learned a lot in that role, worked there for a number of years, even prior to taking on the wardenship. And now just really focused on taking all of those learnings and figuring out how we can best impact this system so we stop locking up our Black and brown people.
I appreciate that. Now, I'm not going to let this slide. So I've seen you on TV a couple of times. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, you know what? I will say that I have been very fortunate to be in spaces where I can truly make an impact. And I think people have seen that and they want to uplift that. And I greatly appreciate that. I've been in a few television programs related to my work while I was at the jail and since I've left the jail, because again, like when we look at our current American correctional system, it's mostly Black and brown people that are impacted, and not just the people who are incarcerated, but families and communities. And to have, I think, a Black woman to stand up and say, even in my role as warden of the largest single site jail in the country, to say, like, we can't continue to lock people up. Like, that's not the way for us to right wrongs.
Right.
I think that went a long way. And I think that's why people wanted to share that message more broadly.
Yeah. Because, I've noticed you wanted to tackle the mental aspect of, and get to the root of why it's happening in our community more frequently than others. And being a psychologist, what did you gather, and, I know you've done studies and, things of that nature. What did you gather? What was the most enlightening thing that you found in some of your studies and some of your travels that impacted our communities the most?
Yeah, I have to say trauma. Like
Okay.
we don't talk a lot about trauma. Even growing up, like things happen.
Right.
Growing up poor, growing up with mental illness running rampant in our families and our communities and violence occurring, different things happening. And we as Black and Brown people have not had the resources in our communities to help us to effectively deal with trauma when it happens. And what I've seen is that the impact of those incidents, because it's a lot of them that we
Right.
deal with, they fester and they grow into explosions, and
Mhm.
we will sometimes manifest our pain through drug use, through drug selling, through just trying to make some money, through violence, and then we end up targets of this criminal legal system. And once you're in it, it's hard to get out of it. And one thing that I realized in my work in corrections and since I've left is that when you look at people who are incarcerated, 100% of them have been overexposed to trauma. Like
Wow.
that's not a coincidence. And so if we can get more healing supports in our communities, specifically in Black and Brown and poor communities, then we can mitigate this pipeline of Black and Brown people ending up in the criminal justice system.
Got you. Yeah. You know, like I said, not knocking my religious people at all, but sometimes we especially from the South and in the Bible Belt, it's take it to the altar. You know, it's take it to the altar. And sometimes, yeah, I believe in the religion of higher power. However, sometimes people need more once they leave those buildings, as
Yeah.
far as therapy and things of that nature. Sometimes medication to deal with some of these things that they're dealing with. Like I said, y'all religious people don't jump on me. I'm but you need more than take it to the altar. You need some actual, that's why our higher powers, God created doctors, psychologists, and everything. So we could go seek those people. And I think that's a huge thing in our community, and by me being a veteran, I could say personally, you know, when I transitioned out the military, it was hard, you know, and I felt like I was good, but I really wasn't good because I
Mhm.
went through a transition of, what do I do? Where do I belong? And all this other stuff. So I eventually seek and talk to somebody because I'm like, where what's going on with me? You know what I'm saying? So I could attest to that to myself, but it took time for me to get to that point. So
Yeah.
with that saying, what are you thinking, and what are you trying to do to try to change the mindset of people like myself and others, that's like, hey, I got it under control. I
Yeah.
don't need help. How do you try to combat that? Because that's the initial thing we have to face because everyone thinks they're okay. you know, and dysfunction, they live in so much dysfunction that it becomes functional to them.
Mhm.
So how
Yeah.
do you combat that?
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. It's definitely taboo. Mental health and mental illness is taboo topics for us in Black community and Brown communities. And I think just getting at the stigma when people are young so that it's more normalized for us. So one thing that I did is actually as soon as I left working in corrections, it started working with kids more and thinking about how we could normalize the value of being mentally healthy among our young people. And so I created a curriculum for mental wellness using music.
Oh,
And funny story, I'll shorten it as much as possible. So I
it's fun.
was working in, I had partnered with this school on the south side of Chicago to work with our young people with this curriculum. And I came in, I'm thinking, I'm older, but I'm not that older. Like I
Right.
still have a feel for the music. So I picked out some songs and had like this whole like group therapy experience
hmm
around songs so we could break it down. And when I played, I'm not even going to tell you the artist I played. They looked at me like, Dr. J, who are you listening to? So like meeting our people where they are.
Mhm.
I asked our young people, I was like, tell me who you're listening to. And they threw out this name, Polo G. I had never
Okay.
heard of Polo G at the time. Don't knock me for that. But
Look, don't knock me because I never.
but listen, and this is where like us as professionals, we have to be willing to be open to, again, meeting people where they are. I went home and I listened to the whole Polo G album, and using my clinical expertise, broke down what he was saying to talk about like the trauma he was experiencing, the strategies he was using, good and bad, to cope with it, and then establish the curriculum around the Polo G album, through the storm. And
Right.
when we brought it back to the young people and we were sitting around and breaking down like what we experienced, like we take so much and we don't even have a name for it. And so just to help them to name it, I think help break down some of the stigma. And then just thinking through, just like, it's not about us being weak, and it's not about us not being resilient, because we're some of the most resilient people in this world, but
Yeah.
it's about us building up our reserve of support. So when the stuff hits us, we
Hmm.
can take it more effectively. And that's what we did with our young people. And then we took that curriculum and those experiences working with our young people, and we partnered with the Chicago public school system, which is
Okay.
the third largest school district in the country, more than 300,000 students. And we
Wow.
helped them to think about, what does a school with universal healing supports look like? Like,
Hmm.
let's not wait until our young people experience a tragedy and they're going to need crisis support. Let's offer support even for our young people who seem to be doing well, who seem to have it all, have relationships established with the adults that they're working with, so that when things do happen, they not only have strategies to deal with it, but they have a support system in place. So those are some of the things that we've been doing to try to tackle the stigma around mental health and mental illness that exists in our community. And then just talking openly about, the value of having someone that you can talk with. Like
Right.
you as a Black man just shared, hey, I went and talked with someone. We don't have those conversations often. And so I think just being able to openly share that helps, and it goes a long way.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Not taking anything away from what you just said about the kids, but I, like I was telling you earlier, I co-host a show on Clubhouse, Your Black News, and when the individual was a librarian in Chicago, and she said she had 100 and some odd middle school, elementary and middle schools, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of schools, you know what I'm saying? Because that's a lot just for one. I never thought about how large Chicago was until she mentioned that. But then on the flip side of that, trauma for her. So she's an adult and she lost, she said a total of 17 kids during her career to violent crimes that she worked with directly. It wasn't in the schools, those kids that actually she worked with directly, 17. And she was talking about the trauma that she went through as a as a teacher, a librarian. So I could imagine as a kid what type of trauma that is. Someone you just on the playground with, and then they're like, boom, gone. You know, we were fortunate enough. We grew up in a small area. We didn't experience that too often. It was a few. It was deaths here and there, accidents. When we was going through school, but the consistency, I think, of what's going on there is like I can't even fathom it, as an adult, much less a kid, and processing that. You know what I'm saying? So kudos to you to try to get to the root of the issue and try to get people, like you said, to open up about their traumas. So while we're talking about school, what's your take on? Because I hear this a lot: school to prison pipeline. What is your take on that when people mention that to you in your scope of work?
I'll tell you this. In my work in corrections, I probably had fewer security staff that were in a maximum security housing unit than what they have in some of the schools that I've seen here in Chicago. Like,
Wow.
so to have armed security in the school ready to intervene, it sets our kids up to have normal childlike behaviors become adult crimes. And
Gotcha.
to have more armed security in a school than what I had in the maximum security living unit speaks volumes. And I think that along the way, you spoke about the trauma that the teacher had experienced, and that's a part of the work that we've been doing, is also helping adults to be able to fully support our young people. And the only way they can do that is if they have the support system themselves. And along the way, we lost sight of that. And instead of supporting our teachers and our staff who are working with our young people, we said just bring in law enforcement to deal with it, because we didn't have the reserve to really deal with it. And so, I mean, the impact of what we see happening around trauma and how we have chosen to deal with it through law enforcement is a part of what's driving this phenomenon of mass incarceration, and a part of what's driving just the death toll that we see, because people are having a hard time dealing with the mounds of issues that are falling upon them.
Right. Man, that's just so unfortunate. And not only, these kids today, they're facing, outside forces of death. They're forcing, they're getting those internal forces. Like, I was a guy from Detroit I was speaking with, Carl, and his whole mission is to cut suicide rates down because, once again, brown and black boys are the number one leading, they're leading the pack right now as far as suicide. And it's like, what, like you said, mentally, what's going on, triggering and causing this, you know what I'm saying? And like you said, you got to get to the root of the problem before you could solve the problem. Like you said, poverty, trauma at the home, drug use, all this other stuff. And COVID, it just threw everything out of whack, because that kid that probably was going to school, sleeping in class all day, that probably was his only rest. You know what I'm saying? And then he's home and gotta make sure his siblings are taken care of, and make sure he gotta protect everyone in his family or her family. And it's like, that was taken away from him due to this pandemic. And I think that weighed on a lot of people as well.
Well, I'll tell you, like, in this country, we've never really acknowledged Black pain.
Right.
Like, we as Black people have not really been allowed to hurt and to show that we're hurting. And so we have had to have it manifest in other ways. And if we don't acknowledge Black pain, then how can we acknowledge Black healing? And so, again, like, us having open conversations about that will only help to challenge the status quo in a way that we need to be healthy. But yeah, our young people, all of us are hurting, like, before COVID. And COVID just added a layer of devastation that we're all trying to deal with in the most effective ways. And we have to be open to having some other tools at our disposal.
Exactly. With in your scope of work. So when you started out, what made you want to go to the criminal side of psychology? And understand, like, it was like it's almost like you were, what's that movie? When Hannibal, you
Oh gosh,
want
the Silence of the Lambs.
yeah. I mean,
Hilarious.
that's what people start thinking when you want to, you want to tap into criminal behavior. You know what I mean? It's jokingly, but in essence of things, the scheme of things, it's almost a correlation there. I know you're not want to deal with serial killers and things of that nature, but I'm quite sure you have engaged them,
Yeah.
in your scope, in your line of work. So, but what made you want to go and put your emphasis on criminal behavior and psychology?
Yeah, I oftentimes will say that it started with my father being incarcerated. So my dad was incarcerated multiple times, but the last significant time I remember, I was about 8 years old, and he was in prison for about 3 years for possession of marijuana. And so a couple of lessons for me in that experience is that I think most people in America think of jails and prisons as being filled with people who have committed heinous and violent acts. And that's far from the truth. I think the majority of people who are incarcerated are in for nonviolent offenses. And we understanding what incarceration does to people, I've seen it firsthand. Like in addition to my dad, so many men I've loved have been involved in this system. And we talked earlier, before we started the show, like how many people we grew up with ended up involved in the criminal legal system for various reasons, and understanding how it was plaguing our community specifically. Right. I wanted to go into the very place where I felt like people were left without a life jacket. Like when people get incarcerated, they're oftentimes forgotten about. And the community outside of the walls really has no inside eyes into what's happening. And I wanted to be a source of support for people when I felt like they needed it the most. And that's really what drove me to do it. And you're right, like when I first started, when I knew I wanted to go into correctional mental health, it really wasn't a field. Like you could do testing and you could, be like the person working with the FBI to try to like get profiles, but there really wasn't a field for people who wanted to work hand in hand on an individual level with people who were impacted by the system. And then I'll just share that in doing that work, after I took a step back, I really realized that while I was trying to do good, I did a lot of good in that one-on-one individual work, but in doing that, I sent a message that I didn't want to send. And that was that the problem was with the person, because what we're talking about right now is not an individual issue. It's very much so a systems level issue. Yeah. Since I'd left, I started, I had the freedom to really look at the impact of this whole system and realizing that it's not individuals that need to change, but it's the system that needs to change. And so that's why I've been more focused now on doing some of this systems level work to really disrupt the pipelines into the system that we see happening.
Awesome. I'm gonna let you share your contact information real quick, and then we'll get back into the interview. So if someone want to reach out to you for speaking engagement or, some type of, I know you said you mentioned a grant you're trying to help other programs, grow. So put out your contact information so people can reach out to you.
Okay, so it's a long one, so get ready. I'll give you everybody a second to get their pen. So it's my first name, it's Nneka .Jones, Jones, Tapia, Tapia, at chicagobeyond.org. So that's Nneka.Jones, Tapia, at chicagobeyond.org.
Cool. Yeah, reach out to us. Use a wealth of knowledge. Like I reached out and he was like, yes, I'm ready. and I appreciate that. So
I appreciate you asking me. I was excited to have this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's like, it's so many negative things that come out of our community. And like I was telling you, I said it's awesome to talk to somebody that's actually doing things, good things, but on a national level is on, because quiet as kept, you're doing things on a national level. I mean, I've seen a couple of pictures of significant people you done had conversations with. So you could toss a couple of names out there if you like.
No, you know what? Like, all of the figures you may have seen, I'm gonna tell you who has stolen my heart. The kids that I work with and the people who have been incarcerated that I work with. Like that's where I get my energy. And that's where I'm fangirling when I'm in these spaces with them, because I'm looking at what they're doing as young people and as people who have dealt with so many different levels of adversity. And I'm just like, if I can just do a little small part to just build them up and to be a partner with them, I'm there.
Yeah, yeah, because that, like I said, that's the focal point. You know, all the accolades and everything. That's just a testament to the work you're doing with them. And a lot of people, you know, it's like they do it for the accolades, not for the work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know, and it's unfortunate sometimes. You know, when I was working in mental health, I enjoyed, you know, what I was doing because I was working with kids and I was working with adults, and it was gratifying to see the progression from the day one
Yeah.
to the 3-month treatment meeting to the 6-month treatment meeting to the yearly treatment meeting. You know what I'm saying? It's like, wow, look at it, look at all the dots. You know, we connected, but we still working on things. You know, you might have and that's why I used to always tell my people. I said, you might have a step back, but as long as you're taking steps forward and continue to progress, we're making progress. You know what I'm saying? Everybody entitled to a setback here and there. That's just the nature of life. You know, you're gonna fall back at some point. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, that's a testament to you. So how'd you end up in Chicago? That's what I was curious about.
Right? Because I had never been here before. We talked about I'm from a small
Right.
town. So when I was in my doctoral program, as a part of completion, you have to complete an internship. And knowing that I wanted to go into correctional mental health, I was looking for correctional institutions to complete my internship. And I said, well, if I'm going to do this, let me do it in the largest place and the most infamous place almost in the world. And so Cook County Jail had an internship program, and they would
Okay.
select 5 people from across the country. I applied and thankfully got it. And so that's what prompted my move to Chicago. And once I started, it was, you ever had that feeling where you feel like something is missing, and when you finally get it, it's like it's a breath of fresh
Wow.
air. Like I
Yeah.
felt like when I walked in the doors, don't get me wrong, I was scared. Like, you
Right.
know, people describe it as almost like walking in the gates of hell, and I wouldn't describe it as anything different. But to be connected with my people in the way that I was able to be connected with them, like that was what I was missing. Like to actually be able to make a difference and to see that difference. That was what drew me in, and I've stayed ever since. I had a brief stint where I moved back to North Carolina, and I started working at a privately owned federal prison. And then it was like Chicago called me back home, and
Right.
have been here ever since.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so pushing forward, I know, you know, briefly before we started, you mentioned having like people that have been incarcerated mentor people that's coming out of the system. Um, with that being said, how do you do you feel that's very important for someone to be mentored by someone that's walked in their shoes? Or sometimes how has that been working out from just your standpoint as far as mentorship and getting people back on the right track?
Yeah, you know, it's one thing to have a person like me who hasn't experienced incarceration working with someone. It's a completely different element to have someone who has walked in your shoes to help you to understand where you are and to help you see a vision to what the future can look like, and to understand that where you are right now isn't where you're going to stay. And so working with people who have been incarcerated and supporting them in their efforts to mentor, provide guidance, provide respite. I mean, they fill in the gaps in so many different ways when people are leaving correctional institutions and when people are still there. That I have to value their expertise that they bring to this, because it's far beyond what I can bring into the space.
Right. Yeah. And you know, here I like I said, you live and you learn. It is like at first, sometimes you look at a person, you're like, well, you did a crime, do the time type mentality. And then you realize it's like, was all that time, valid? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's like, and then like I said, that I started meeting people that had felonies, and it's like you get out, but then they say, oh, put that on your application,
Yeah.
and then that's just a way to go ahead and get your application tossed to the side anyway. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Because it's usually at the top of the application. Have you been ever convicted of a felon? And so, unfortunately, a lot of guys that I've met in the business world, they started their own businesses and doing things on their own and not relying on assistance or
Yeah.
and relying on going back to the streets. You know what I mean? And a lot of these guys that I know their businesses are really flourishing. They're like, I don't want to go back in. You know what I'm saying? And like
Mhm.
they just they like they don't even speed. You know what I'm saying? Because they're so like, yo, I'm not going back. Like, and I think some programs, that I have ran into, I think it sets some guys back up for failure, with some of the housing issues when they get out. They don't
Yeah.
have, proper things of that nature. So I'm glad that you're actually trying to cultivate a system where they could kind of get back and get back to normalcy as quote unquote. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it's like sometimes normalcy is not normal in our society anymore. So it's like a normalcy in a sense. So what's some programs that you're trying to implement on the backside to try to help discourage that behavior outside of the mental things? What other things are you trying to do?
So, the organization I work with now, Chicago Beyond, we're an impact investor. And so we're approaching this justice work from three different angles.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on the realities of why we're approaching this from three different angles when you just talked about like what you are seeing. So, first, if we're really going to turn this tide, like we have to invest in our Black and Brown communities, like to
Right.
make sure our kids have access to quality education, everyone has access to quality healthcare, to make sure that we have safe recreational spaces. And so we're making significant investments in Black and Brown communities and nonprofit organizations, specifically here in Chicago. The second part to that is like people are still in the system right now. Like we have 1.9 million people incarcerated in jails and prisons in this country right now. In
Wow.
addition to the 1.9 million people incarcerated, there's close to 500,000 staff working in these institutions. There's more than 5.7 million children with an incarcerated parent. It's 113 million adults that have an immediate family member who's incarcerated. Like the tentacles of this carceral system extend beyond the people who are incarcerated and the staff within them. But it greatly impacts everybody, but particularly the people incarcerated and the staff. And so understanding how many people are impacted by it, we're working with correctional administrators now,
Mm-hmm.
with people who have been incarcerated and with staff from across the country to help correctional administrators to think about how they can reduce the harms that these systems cause while people are incarcerated. And then we are doing a lot of narrative work around like what the impact of this system really is on people. You talked
Mm-hmm.
about what we call permanent punishments. When you
Right.
get out, it's hard. If you have a felony on your record, it's hard to get a job. It's hard to find housing, especially if you need assisted support. It's hard to be able to even go to your child's school for a program because a lot of schools are doing background checks. And so, in helping people to understand that people who are incarcerated are people and really humanizing them and not demonizing them the way that I feel like we have historically been taught to do, is where we're really trying to put a lot of energy to. And so, just in all of this, it's about uplifting It's about uplifting human dignity.
Right.
Even if I have done something bad, that does not make me a bad person.
Right.
And making sure that people can actually have the resources that they need to thrive.
And that's huge, you know. And yeah, look, I don't like. It's no correlation between the military and prison by any means.
Yes, it is. The level of yes, it is.
Look, well, you know, because look, we volunteer to go, you know, most of us in this era, you know, but it's like you said, the transition back, you know, I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm like, we experience the same things. It's like we get labeled because yeah, you're a veteran, but you know, I was a combat vet. You know what I'm saying? I'm you know, I was in the combat MOS. I never went into combat, but I was labeled a combat vet because of my job in the military. So people will look at your resume and then the first thing they see, oh, you was in combat arms or using artillery, you in infantry, you know, the first thing, oh, he's shell shock or he's, you know, he has an issue, you know. So it's like you said, then like you get that discrimination from that standpoint. So I mean, you know, like I said, by any means, I don't want to compare the two, but I could kind of see how hard it is being incarcerated and get demonized.
Yeah.
As we're demonized coming out of the military, especially Black and brown soldiers, because
Mhm.
it's not glorified in our community for us to go in the military. It's like it's almost for some of us, you know, and I understand why it's like an insult because back then it's like you fight for a country. Even in a sense, you know, till today we still fighting some of the same things they were fighting pre-Vietnam as far as social issues. But the thing about it in our community is like, why are you gonna fight for a country that don't love you? You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? But it's not a last resort. It's sometimes that's what we want to do. My daughter, that's what she want to do. But you know, in our country, sometimes, like I said, we get demonized being a Black vet or a brown vet coming out of the military. It's like they know you have that skill set of combat, of weapons and things of that nature. So they automatically like, what can he do to me if I piss him off?
Mhm. Yeah.
Or what
You
can
know
she
what
do
I
to me?
liken? I
Right.
liken what you're saying to, I draw the similarities between how you're sharing your military experience and what I have seen with staff who work in correctional
Hmm.
institutions. Like I've talked a lot about like the impact of the system on people incarcerated, but staff don't come out unscathed.
Right.
Like that, even though they volunteer to work in this institution, some of them, it's their only economic means if they're going to survive. For some places and for some people, the only means of employment is the prison that's down the street. And for some
Here.
people, yeah,
Murray,
right,
Murray, Murray.
exactly. And for some people, you know, it is, you know, a family way of engaging in public society. Like, you know, my father worked in corrections, my grandfather, and so for some people that's it. But what I have seen in correctional staff is there is a detrimental impact to them too. Like
Right.
they have the highest rate of suicide among all American professions in this
Wow.
country. They have high rates of divorce, disproportionate. They have a life expectancy rate that's like 20 years lower than the general population. And
I did not know
all
that.
of that is linked to their own experience of trauma working in corrections. And so when you talk about your experiences in the military, whether you volunteered for it or were voluntold to do it,
Right.
there's still impacts, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
and the value that society places on your experiences just further deteriorates, you know, your ability to for lack of a better term combat some of those ills that, you know, surface for you. And so I understand what you're saying, and
Right.
I don't take it lightly. Like we have to think about how so many of our policies and practices in this country are rooted in fear. And until we really, like, when we talk about root causes, like, let's talk about the fear that drives like what you just said you experience when you go to apply for a job. Let's talk about the fear that, you know, is driving some of these housing stipulations that won't allow people who have histories of incarceration to live there. And that's
Right,
really the only way we're going to start to break down this system.
right, right, right. So, man, that was a deep conversation right there.
I feel like I was just talking away, but this has been
I
great.
know. Look, we cool, man. But you know, we're gonna talk maybe another 5 or 10 minutes, and then, like, I know you're a busy person, and it's a Friday, and we got to get ready for the game tomorrow.
Well,
But
who you telling? Representing Carolina Blue with your
oh
sweater.
yeah, for
Love it.
sure, for
Thank you.
sure, for sure, for sure. But you know, pushing forward. I know you're just ideally in your perfect world in your mind. What would you like to see with this system? Which way? How would you like to see it revamp without getting all without getting all your inside, what I'm saying, some all your inside secrets away. But what would you like to see? Some of the major things that you would like to see in the future revamp and would make your day and put a smile on your face.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you from the 10,000 foot view, and I'll tell you from the 1,000 foot view. From the
Okay.
10,000 foot view, I just ultimately want to see freedom for my people.
Okay.
Like we've never been free, and I want to see us to have the ability to have the freedom to not just be, but to do and to say and to just grow and be the beautiful people we are. And
Right.
then I would say from the 1,000 foot view, like where we're working now with these systems is to really push correctional administrators to value the expertise of people with lived experience of this system as they're creating policies. Like lawmakers, policymakers, we have to have people with lived experience at the table driving policy change so that we're less likely to create policies rooted in fear that we've been doing. And to think about safety, not just in terms of physical safety. That's important. You know, when we
Right.
lock our doors, we lock our windows, we want to
Hmm.
make sure that no one's coming in, right? But
Right.
there is so much more to safety than the physical aspect. Like, is a person healthy? Do they have psychological and social and medical health?
Right.
Like, do they trust themselves and the people around them? Like, do they see the value that they bring? And do people see the value that they bring? Are they connected to themselves and are they connected to the people they love? Like those are the things that I want us to begin to look at, not just in our communities outside of the wall, but also inside the wall, and to not throw away the people who have made some bad decisions just because they made those bad decisions, but to more fully support them. That's what we call holistic safety. That's what we as an organization are uplifting and working with correctional administrators to focus on, is that holistic safety.
Gotcha. That's awesome. And like you said, I want to see, like you said, I want to see our people free as well. Because like you said, it's a lot of good people serving time, and there's some bad people that, yeah, but it's a lot of good people
People,
serving time.
people who have done bad
Yeah,
things.
bad things. Yeah, and but like you said, it's like it's like you said, it's tough. I'm not calling his name, but somebody we grew up with, he's behind bars right now. It's like I know he's a good person, but it's like just caught up in life,
Yeah,
and like you said,
yeah,
not taking, the afforded some of the opportunities, and people like, well, they could have did this. It ain't always the case. You know what I'm saying? Everybody doesn't have the same drive. Like everybody didn't go to Carolina. Everybody, didn't go to East Carolina or the
yeah.
college. Just for instance, everybody didn't go work at DuPont. So all of us took different routes in life. And some of us ended up to the good, and some of us ended up in tight spots. But it's they're still good people at the end
Absolutely.
of the day. So before we go, I, I I like to get a nugget from you. You're from Grifton. I'm from Maine, small town. Got a young lady out there in high school, middle school. Um, like I said, without direction, they just like I don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring. What words would you give to that young lady, or just a young person in general,
Yeah.
that doesn't have any direction, just feels like tomorrow's not well. They don't even want to see tomorrow because tomorrow looks so bad. What would you encourage that person by words? What would you tell that person?
I would tell them to see the value in themselves, and to see the value in the people that they love, like to truly take time and to look in the mirror to see all that is within them and outside of them that's beautiful. We don't always get those messages. Like when we
Right.
walk into, you mentioned churches earlier, we don't oftentimes see representations of spiritual high figures that look like us. And so it's hard for us to see that goodness within ourselves. When we walk into our school doors, it's hard for us to see images of people who look like us, who have done great things. And then what I would tell my people is we have to seek those things out for ourselves, and that starts with us. And to know that you are divinely created. And so you do have good within you and good outside of you. And it's up to us to begin to see that for ourselves and then to manifest that goodness by what we do with other people. It doesn't always take grand acts to draw the attention and to make someone's day. Sometimes it's a small, kind word. Sometimes it's a smile. And the more that we do that for other people, the more that it helps us to also see the good within ourselves. And so those are the messages that I try to send to our young people. We all have the power to see our lives differently and to see the value within it and the value we can bring for others. It's up to us to do it.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. I appreciate your time. And like I said, maybe we could chop it up again later on in the year or something.
Definitely.
Like once you get some of these programs rolling, and like you said, if you need a base to push the information out, hey, I'm down for it. So just hit me up. And
Definitely.
like I said, great talking to you. Many blessings to your family for allowing you to step away from them for a little bit. I know you got a little one. How old is
Yeah.
he? How old
Two,
is he?
two and a
Two.
half
Oh,
going on 20.
ooh. Have fun with
You
that.
you
Have
know
fun
what
with
it's
that.
like.
Yeah, look. I know it's like again because my grandkids. Oh my goodness. But yeah, much blessings to them for allowing take a little time on this Friday. And like I said, I really appreciate you, coming out and sharing this knowledge because it's much needed to give a different perspective on our system than what's always projected to us.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We get the projection of, oh, well, they get 3 meals, they got somewhere to live, they got this, they got that. But it's like it's a whole nother world in there. And I'm glad you allowed that perspective to be enlightened, and cut some of those stereotypical things that people like to impose on incarcerated individuals. And I'm much blessings to you. And like I said, you have any last words you want to say?
No, just thank you. Thank you for having me on and giving me the space to even talk about this. People
Yeah.
have my contact information. You can also visit chicagobeyond.org and you can send us a general email and say, hey, I want to speak to that woman who was talking about justice. And you'll be connected with me. So just thank you, Charlemagne. And thank you for having these conversations so that
Oh yeah.
people can hear and bear witness to the great things that we as Black people are doing.
Cool. I appreciate that. Appreciate that kind words. And once again, people's been the real Charlemagne. Like I said, don't forget to follow me on all platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart. And like I said, subscribe to that YouTube channel. It's much appreciated. And until next time, peace. Oh yeah, go Carolina. See y'all.